Okay.
All right. So now we are on our continuation of our introduction to gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. Last time we talked about some of the basics of what those terms mean, and we talked a little bit about intersex and non-binary and some of the things that fall in between the basic binary that we've been taught. And so we're going to continue on that theme with queer and genderqueer. So before the 1980s, the word queer was mostly used as a slur, and it still can be used as a slur, just as many labels within that people use in the LGBT plus community can be. People still use the word gay as an insult, just as they still use the word queer as an insult. But the community has taken the word and reclaimed it just as they did with the word gay. So it is a identity. So people identify as queer. They will say, instead of saying that they are gay, lesbian, or any other of the terms, they might say that they are queer, and that will be their identity. It is also used often as an umbrella term that sort of encompasses the whole experience of the LGBTQIA plus community.
Academia.
Oh yeah, it is, just to remind you that it is no longer just a slur. It is actually the proper term in academia. If you take a class on gender and sexuality, they will probably call it queer studies. I'm actually taking a class this semester called Queer Literature and Theory. So genderqueer is basically the gender equivalent term of queer. So genderqueer means someone who doesn't conform to male or female gender identity or presentation. It is also can be used as sort of an umbrella term for people who don't conform to male or female, but it also can be like a specific identity where someone says, they might say instead of non-binary that they are genderqueer, and that would just be because that term feels more comfortable to them and they feel like it describes their experience more. So I would be careful with the word because there are still some circles that will be apprehensible about it, but it is a perfectly acceptable term to use. There is some pushback right now against the term, but that is mostly by people who are trying to exclude and divide the community. So there are people who think the word is bad generally just because they don't know that it is acceptable. They just haven't had much exposure to the actual queer community. So for people like that, you just have to educate them a little bit and remind them that it is an acceptable term that many people identify with. But there are some people who are pushing back against the term right now in a way that is not so great. But it is an acceptable term. It is an umbrella term that describes the whole community, and it is a term that is very commonly used within the community. So do be careful with it if there are people around who are uncomfortable with it, but it is an acceptable word.
There's even queer theology is a thing. There's a whole field within theological studies similar to womanist or liberation theologies. It's within those same kind of feminist, it's in those same sort of categories, but it's queer theology is a thing.
So this is a term that falls under the genderqueer non-binary umbrella. So it is gender fluid, and it means somebody whose identity changes. If you were here last time, you'll remember the video we watched with the trans person who was talking about their experience in the church, and it was from a show called Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. Their name is Mo, and so these are a bunch of pictures of Mo, but Mo is gender fluid, so their identity and their expression changes. How frequently it changes depends on the person, and how often it changes. It often is from male to female, but it might be to somewhere in between. So someone might feel that they are male one day and then non-binary the next. It all depends on the person, but it is again the same sort of, they feel it inherently as part of who they are, that their gender is changing from day to day. So you can see Mo is wearing a lot of different outfits there. They're wearing an outfit that's very feminine there and a little more masculine, non-conforming there. And so Mo just changes the way that they present based on how they feel their gender identity is that day. Before we move on to more terms on sexual orientation, does anyone have any questions about anything we've covered about gender identities and non-binary identities? Yeah.
Bruce, I heard there was a friend that had a baby that was born with both parts, all parts, for female and male.
Mm-hmm.
They had to make a choice, they were told to make a choice at the birth of the child as to whether they were going to be female or male, whether they were going to be the male part or the female part. Is that what would happen when you're on their lives, or what parents chose wrong?
Repeat the question so it can be
So the question was about you knew a baby who was born intersex, and the parents had to choose whether for them to have surgeries on that or not, and what the effects of that can be down the line. So in the video that we watched last week that had intersex people talking about their experience, they did address some of that. It is very common when intersex babies are born that the doctors tell the parents that they need surgeries for their health, to remove things like, often if they have outside female parts, they're told that testicles need to be removed for their health because they can be cancerous or something like that. It is almost always not true, and it is usually that the doctor does not understand that intersex bodies can be perfectly healthy with no surgeries. Just because they are not the way that they expect their bodies to be does not mean that they are going to be unhealthy. It might not have been the right choice to have the surgeries, but I would not blame the parents because they can only go on what information they are told. Unfortunately, all information they have is from the doctor. And yeah, a long time ago, even less information available on any of that kind of stuff. Probably basically no information that they could find that would tell them otherwise. So of course they trusted the doctor, and I don't blame them for that decision at all. That would be probably, I think, what any parent would do if the doctor was telling them something. But these days, intersex people are spreading more awareness, trying to get the message out there that intersex children don't need to be changed, and if your doctor is telling you that your child needs surgery to change them when they are intersex, you should find someone else to consult to make sure that any surgery they have is actually necessary. So, yeah, that is...
Nelson's telling me I have to move into the frame when I speak. As for how it might affect somebody down the line, it kind of depends, because you can't know when the child is born whether they're going to identify more male or more female. And so if you choose, and the choice is often kind of arbitrary when the child is an infant, and so it may be that the child would identify the other way from what you choose. And so that's the kind of thing that it can have. And I think really, just my opinion, the real harm comes mostly from the secrets. Secrets in family systems are never a healthy thing. And often those things are kept from a child until they're older and then sprung on them in ways that are not helpful or healthy. I think it's
many
probably...
of the people in the video said that they didn't learn that they were intersex until they were at least 12.
Mm-hmm.
And then parents told them. So it can be very hard on children who are intersex to have those surgeries and be told to conform to one gender when, non-binary people feel sort of the same thing, that they don't want to conform to one or the other. And for intersex people, they have the same experience of being told to conform to one another when they've never really fit into one or the other. This is part of why we want to learn all of these terms and things, because even if we're just going based on biology, not everyone fits into male or female. So, we want to make sure that we are welcoming everybody as they are.
Yeah.
So, sexual orientation. So gay or homosexual is the term used for somebody who likes people of the same sex or gender identity that they identify as. So a man who likes men, or a woman who likes women. Heterosexual or straight means someone who likes people of the opposite sex or gender identity from them. So women who like men and men who like women. Lesbian is someone who identifies as a woman or feminine person, and who also likes women or feminine people. This has someone's identity as a trans person can affect how they identify with their sexual orientation. A trans woman who likes other women will probably often identify as a lesbian. But because it's sort of complicated, people just kind of will use the term that feels most comfortable to them. But I think the most common thing is for people to go based on their gender identity. So bi or bisexual means somebody who likes both men and women. It is the Reconciling Works website says that it is sometimes an umbrella term, but not really everyone uses an umbrella term. It is sometimes used as an umbrella term for people who like more than one gender, because there are a few different terms for that. But I think there's different umbrella terms these days that are preferred rather than bisexual as the umbrella term. But people do use it in different ways with how they identify. So this is from Reconciling Works website, so it's ELCA Lutherans talking about their experience with sexual orientation.
I'm trying to get the video to play. Is it playing? Mm-hmm. Okay.
One of the most common questions I was asked when I was coming out, and I still get asked every now and then, is, well, Smitty, how do you know you're gay? Maybe you just hadn't met the right woman. Let me introduce you to somebody.
I personally identify as somewhat bisexual, and so I can't speak for people who are sort of monosexual. Some of them would say they have met exactly the right person for them.
Well, I appreciate you wanting to help me meet someone, but I don't appreciate that you possibly see me as broken and are trying to fix me.
It comes with a lot of risk. It comes with a lot of risk when you decide to say, this is who I am.
particularly when you've been taught that it's not a good enough thing to be, and that you're less than because of that.
We need to be in a community where we are safe to be who we are, to be trusted, to know who we are. And in those times of questioning who we are, to be allowed to question, and to not be told what the other person thinks we should be.
When these kinds of assumptions that I just haven't met the right person yet, or, you know, maybe I should reconsider, they sort of belittle the work that I've done, the heart work and the soul work that I've done to come to that conclusion, and the agency that I have as a person to make those kinds of decisions and conclusions.
I am trans. This is my life and my journey, and I feel that it is mysterious and a paradox, but it is a gift that I have, and I don't want to be changed.
So if your child tells you they're gay, if your child tells you they're trans or queer, they have questions, don't tell them, well, maybe they haven't met the right person yet. Tell them to sit down and talk to you. Just listen.
So the video is just so our next term is pansexual, and this means someone who likes people of all gender identities. So it is sort of similar to bisexual, and so pansexual generally means more people who like people of all gender identities, and bisexual generally means more people who like people of two gender identities. But it really just is up to the person which they feel more comfortable with. So there is some overlap, but it's just up to the person which label feels more like them. So we have a video from Schitt's Creek with one of the main characters.
Which is a really great TV
Really great
show
show.
if you haven't watched
Just
it.
to be clear, I'm a red wine drinker.
That's fine.
Okay, cool. I only drink red wine.
Okay.
And up until last night, I was under the impression that you too only drank red wine. But I guess I was wrong.
I see where you're going with this. I do drink red wine, but I also drink white wine.
Oh.
And I've been known to sample the occasional rosé. And a few years back, I tried a Merlot. It used to be a Chardonnay, which got a bit complicated.
Okay, yeah, so you're just really open to all wines.
I like the wine and not the label. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. This is just very new to me, so as long as you didn't roll over and cry yourself to sleep with regret, then we're good, right?
No, I absolutely did that. Just wept for hours in the dark. I say we go with this one, it's the biggest.
It's playing again.
No, don't do that.
Just to be clear.
Stop. There we go.
So yeah, so that was a good video that illustrated sort of a metaphor for pansexuality. So now we'll talk about asexuality. So we talked earlier about how romantic attraction and sexual attraction are different, and that different people have a different relationship between those two attractions. So there are people who do not feel sexual attraction at all. It is not a disorder, and it does not mean the same thing as low libido or sex drive. It is just the lack of sexual attraction, just sort of not the same interest in those sorts of things. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone does not want a romantic relationship. There are people who don't want romantic relationships, but a lot of asexual people still want a romantic partner. Just means they don't have the same interest in sex that other people do. And if you want like more information on that, the Asexual Visibility and Education Network, also called AVEN, is a really great website that has a lot of information on asexuality. All the questions that you could have on that, they have answers for. It is also often abbreviated as ACE, and this is the ACE symbol has been sort of adopted as a symbol of the community. Does anyone have any questions on that?
It's also a spectrum.
Yes, it is.
There's a spectrum, an ACE spectrum. So some people who are identify as ACE might be considered. There's a lot of terms, demisexual, but like an example might be somebody who is only attracted sexually to somebody once they get to know them and have an emotional attachment to them, and they don't feel a sexual attraction just on, looking at them or seeing somebody on TV or something like that. That might be one point on the ACE spectrum.
Yeah, it is a spectrum of experience. Some people only feel sexual attraction sometimes, or to certain people in certain situations. It can be a complicated thing to understand even for people who identify on that spectrum, but it is just to be clear, not the same thing as like celibacy or like choosing not to have sex. It's not the same thing. It is asex, because people who choose not to have sex might still feel sexual attraction and just sort of, push that away. But asexual people do not feel sexual attraction. Yeah. So here's our flag, same one that we have in the back there. And LGBTQIA+. So L means lesbian, G means gay, bi is for bi, T is for trans, Q is for queer, I is for intersex, A is for asexual, and the plus is for everyone who doesn't fall under that, but who has a different experience with gender or sexual orientation. And here's some of our other flags. We have some of them hanging up around the room. So this is what the colors on the basic pride flag mean. You've probably seen it without the brown and black, which there are a few different versions of the basic pride flag. The original pride flag, it's changed a few times, but what people mostly use is the life, healing, sunlight, nature, harmony, and spirit. But the diversity and inclusivity was added to make sure that we're including different experiences across race and culture. And there is another version of the flag that has sort of like a triangle at the top that you might see, that has the brown and the black, and also the pink, white, and blue. The pink, white, and blue flag is a trans flag, which is, this is blue, pink, white, and the blue is for masculine identities, the pink is for feminine identities, and the white is for the transition or for non-binary identities. And this is the bisexual flag, which we have right over here, and the trans flag is in the back, by the way. So the bisexual flag, the colors are for attraction to femininity, to masculinity, and to other or in between. And then this flag, I do not know what the colors mean, but it is right over there, and that is the non-binary flag. And so it's the yellow, white, purple, and black.
What's this one?
And that one I do not have up here.
That's the ACE flag, isn't it?
Yes, that is the asexual flag. So it's purple, white, gray, and black. So that's for anyone who identifies on the asexual spectrum. I am also not sure what those colors mean. I don't know how I remembered the ones that I did, honestly.
Let me tell some of the little dim.
This LGBTQ acronym that people throw around, it can be really confusing.
It's a group, and however the group chooses to identify, I think the most important thing is that that choice is respected by people outside of the group.
The labels are an attempt to help everyone feel like that they're seen, that they're welcome, that they're that we all have an actual place.
I think that by recognizing the particularity of my transness helps me to connect with other people with my specific struggle or joys or journey, but also recognizing that I'm a part of a larger queer community helps us to share common stories about coming out and the struggles in the workplace or the joys that we have in being a beautiful, diverse creation.
There has to be a name to something for it to be recognized, and you can be like, you can stand up and be counted amongst your fellow people in that group.
But we also have to consider the intersections of race and class and religion, nationality, and all these other different identity factors that go into how people express themselves within these different categories.
Amongst friends, I always like to help people in terms of translating something that doesn't make sense for a group that you're not a part of. I think that people in the United States are more familiar with black and white relations, so if you don't know why LGBTQIA feel like they need to label themselves, then think about the way that black people in the United States have quote unquote labeled themselves. We have had many names said to us that we didn't necessarily accept, but once we were able to have a voice for ourselves, we asked. So African American became the term, and it changes. It's okay for things to change.
Even those of us that identify as being a part of the LGBTQIA community, we often sometimes don't understand its fullness. And it's only through being in a relationship with one another that I think we're able to move towards that space where we're able to see, oh, this is why it's important to have a defined label or a defined expression that allows us to move in a way that gives us voice and presence in our society.
We have a big, beautiful God who has created all of this diversity. What better way to worship that God but to celebrate that diversity and to look for it?
Can everyone hear that okay?
Sorry about the volume. I couldn't get it to go any higher, but all of these videos are available on the Reconciling Works website, which is reconcilingworks.org.
Like, because these are being recorded, I think we'll go to where they're posted on YouTube and put the links to all the videos we use in the description so people can go find
Yeah, we'll put the links in. For sure.
But yeah, I mean, that video is basically them talking about why there are so many labels, and that basically it's just so that people can understand themselves and others better and name their experiences and share their experiences and celebrate their experiences. So here's some other important terms to know, other than all the basics that we have just covered. Heteronormativity is the attitude or belief that heterosexual is the normal way to be. So whenever someone is doing things that express that being gay or somewhere else on sexual orientation spectrum, whenever someone expresses like things like, you know, you haven't met the right person, or anything that implies that it is not natural or that it is strange, they are holding up the structure of heteronormativity, which in our culture says that heterosexual is the correct default way to be. Coming out refers to when someone becomes more open and shares their sexual orientation or gender identity, whether to a small group or large group. So when someone tells you that they are gay or trans, they are coming out to you. Often coming out of the closet is the full way that people say that. But that's the term for when someone shares that. Assigned gender at birth.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Can I say, if somebody comes out to you, two things. One, it's a sacred thing, and it's an important moment to just be present for them, to be a safe space for them. And two, if they come out to you, that doesn't necessarily mean that they feel safe coming out to other people. It's not your moment to share. It's theirs. So just because somebody comes out to you doesn't mean that then you can let everybody know, oh, Bob is gay. Like that's not your thing to share with other people.
Yeah.
It may not feel safe for them to be out with other people. So let them choose their moment and a way of coming out wherever they might be, and
we will talk
keep
more
that for
about
yourself.
the importance about that later, but that is important to remind everyone of, that coming out is something that it's a gift to have someone come out to you. That means that they trust you enough to tell you that. So you want to keep that trust and keep that safe and make sure that they feel accepted and not like you're going to go spread that to other people who they might not trust.
We have about 2 minutes.
Okay, so assigned gender at birth is, we talked about the sex, which is, the little check of whether someone says you are male or female on your birth certificate. So assigned gender at birth is the gender that someone is told they are at birth or what they are raised as. So we know that sex and gender are different, but in our society they are not usually treated as if they are different. So the sex that someone has is often what they are raised as. They are often raised as gender identity that sort of corresponds to that. So your assigned gender at birth is whether you were told you were male or female at birth, and it was how you were raised. So I was assigned female at birth, which is our other term here, and so it's someone who was told they are a girl at birth and is raised as a girl. So I was raised to present fairly femininely and have feminine pronouns and all of that. So that's the term you use to say what someone was raised as, and that is often shortened to AFAB, just means assigned female at birth. And the equivalent is assigned male at birth, someone who's told they are a boy at birth or is raised as a boy, which is often shortened to AMAB. So if you see those terms, that is what those terms mean, and it is.
You want to do this last one, and then
Yeah.
we'll pick up from here next
So
week.
I added this slide after I had a conversation about a little bit with someone who was here last week on sort of the animal world and the natural world and the way that differences in orientation and gender sort of come up. But people often say that being queer or having the queer experience is sort of unnatural or it is definitely not true. If we look at the animal world, we have many examples of animals that do not conform to what we say is male or female, or to heterosexual experiences. We have albatross and the sheep, and those are bonobos, which is just a species of ape. Those are all animals that are have like many recordings of having partners of the same sex as them. For like a couple of species, I believe the sheep and the albatross, they are even known to have lifelong partners that are of the same sex as them. It's not super common, but it's way more common than we think it is in the animal world. Penguins also have a strange phenomenon. It's something that people talk a lot about. There's a lot of gay gay penguins in the zoos. There's even like a really famous couple of penguins from, I don't remember which zoo, but they had like a whole little kids book written about them, but it was like these two male penguins who became partners, and the zoo even had an like extra egg that none of the other penguins were taking care of, so they gave it to them, and they ended up raising a chick together, who then, it was a female chick who then ended up getting her own female partner, so.
Pawnee Zoo, right?
That was not the Pawnee Zoo.
It was a thing.
It was a thing on Parks and Rec.
Yeah. But it is actually like that like penguin couple was fairly famous, but it's actually not uncommon in zoos apparently for them to have penguins who take partners of the same sex. And sometimes they give them eggs to raise and they raise them, or sometimes they steal other couples' eggs. But we also have sort of pushing the boundaries of how we see gender. Clownfish change from male to female based on the availability of males and females to keep the species going. It's actually pretty well known in the scientific world that they do that on a regular basis. The marsh hawk up there is a species that something like 40% of males actually look like females. So, like, they're male, but the way that they look, you would think that they were a female hawk. And it's like a really common thing, and it's sort of a survival mating tactic. The cardinal here is actually one species that we see intersex individuals fairly commonly. You can see that this cardinal is half red, half brown. That's because they are a intersex cardinal. They have both male and female parts. It's something that we see strangely in cardinals fairly often. And the lion here is the one I have pictured is they had a lioness at the zoo, and one day after, this lion is like 10 years old or something, it suddenly started growing a mane.
Yeah, menopause. We'll do that.
So yeah, I think they were looking into make sure that it wasn't something like a spike in testosterone from something that was harmful. But if it's not something harmful, then it's not harmful. If it's not from like some sort of internal thing going on, then it's not harmful at all. So, and they have a lioness with a mane. And there are actually quite a few accounts in the wild. It's not a rare thing for people to see lionesses who have manes and other male parts, basically intersex lions, or just lions that sort of act in between. It's actually really common to see lions who, it's not like you're guaranteed to see that, but it is way more common than you would think for scientists to find lions who act as both male and female within the roles of the pride, because they are like a lioness with a mane and some more male parts to them, and that's actually a fairly common thing in the animal world. The last thing I have is the snake in the middle, which I think you showed me that. It was absolutely fascinating. But that snake is actually from the St. Louis Zoo. It was a python. It was one of the oldest pythons in the world. But it was a female snake. It had not been in contact with the male snake for 15 years. And then it suddenly laid eggs and had babies. And I just think that's absolutely fascinating. That not all animals require to do things the way we expect them to,
Parthenogenesis.
We've got intersex cardinals, we've got trans lions, gender non-conforming hawks, gay penguins and asexual snakes, you know? So it is way more common in the animal world than we think it is, and I think that just kind of shows that it's definitely not unnatural, and it's just part of the diversity of the world that God has created.
So we will pick up there next week. We have one more section of the presentation, and we'll talk.
We should have covered most of the basic terminology in the past two presentations, and so the third one will be focusing more on just a little bit of like history and different experiences within different communities, and we will have a section focusing on allyship and how to support members of the LGBT plus community, and we will be talking about pronouns during that, which I know is something that people get really caught up on and gets really confusing. So we will go in depth on pronouns and how to use them and all of that information.
Thank you. Hey, Grace, you're doing a brilliant job.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.